Welcome to the Talking Shop podcast, where I'm here to share stories, lessons, and experiences in sports performance and professional development. I'm your host, Matt Tometz. Today, I'm joined by Kyle Voigt, the sports science coordinator for the University of Southern California, Dr. John Wagle, who is the director of performance science and player development for the Kansas City Royals, and Steve Breitenstein, who is the director of coaching and everything else under the sun at TCBoost Sports Performance. So, episode 100, we made it. And I was chatting with Steve Breitenstein, my mentor, who I mentioned a lot on this podcast. What should I do for episode 100? And he said, why don't you have on your top guests, favorite guests, and just have a roundtable discussion? And then Steve immediately said, sorry, I'm busy. So, and it's funny, when I was thinking about who I wanted to ask on, I reference your 3 episodes the most out of all of the episodes. And specifically, one part of each episode, and that is what I will have each of you guys discuss. We'll go 10, 12 minutes per person, but if everyone could just please say hello, so those who are listening can kind of put a name with the voice.
I think I'll start because I think John's dog might bark a little bit. So my name is Kyle Voigt. As you mentioned, I'm the sports science coordinator for USC Athletics. Predominantly, my day-to-day is working a lot with our football program, as well as with our women's volleyball team. But people ask me questions for other sports, I'm more than happy to help in that way. My job tends to center around catapult distribution, but also I'm really trying to push our teams to assess better. Hey, we need to collect information on these athletes so we can make better choices when it comes to decision making. So that's essentially what I do.
I love it. I'll go next. I'm Steve Breitenstein. I'm the director of coaching at TCBoost Sports Performance. Do a little bit of everything in the private side. On the business development, actually coaching athletes in the high school setting, working with teams, leadership development with Coach Jeremy Boone out of Charlotte. So I got my hands full with a few different things that we're working on, but love the coaching piece as well.
Yeah, I can't make it through a recording without my dog interjecting a little bit. So I apologize about that, but I'm John Wagle. First of all, a pleasure to be on with all of you. It's really an honor. I'm currently working for the Kansas City Royals. I'm our director of performance science, player development. I kind of just support wherever I'm needed. I oversee our physical development processes, but also provide support on the technical, tactical side to our pitching and hitting wings of our player development system. And so it's a really rewarding job. I grew up playing baseball, and so it's nice to be able to grow the game in a kind of a unique way.
Fantastic. And if I do not overstate this enough, not on air, how much each one of you guys all mean to me. Kyle, you were the first person that I reached out to way back when, started my whole networking journey. And you were actually the connection to Dr. Wagle, and then all the people and many guests that, you and Dr. Wagle have both connected me with, and just the advice that you guys give me, whether I want to hear it or I need to hear it, that just means a lot. And Steve, the fact that I get to interact with you 6 to 7 days a week honestly feels like a cheat code for anyone at my stage in my career. So I'm super grateful for all 3 of you guys, and I'm super glad that we can do this. So Kyle, we'll start with you. We'll go in chronological order of TSP. Kyle was on episode 59 and 63. 63 was all about his personal philosophy and the presentation he gave when he was interviewing for the job he currently has at USC. So in 1 or 2 minutes, can you just give us a brief overview of kind of that presentation, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So just some background. I went to school at USC. I did my undergrad here. My dad's a professor here. My brother got his MBA from USC. I went to games as a kid. So, I grew up 20 minutes away. So USC was in my blood. It's something that is very dear and passionate to me. You probably can't see it on the board above me, but there's a statement called Whakapapa, which is a Maori term for basically a stack of rocks, which essentially means it's a legacy. And I took that very blatantly from the All Blacks. But I have it written that the legacy is the most intimidating opposition. At USC, you're not competing against Oregon, Arizona State. You're competing against the history of the program. You walk down the stairs, there's hundreds of All-Americans. It's fascinating. So the presentation I essentially gave was, hey, this is who I am, this is why I am, and this is how I do what I do. And I think the biggest point we took from our conversation in the past, Matt, was no matter what your personal philosophy is, whether you've defined it or not, you have one and you live one. And people are going to see what your philosophy is, but by what you do. You can say whatever you want to say, but what you do is going to define your philosophy.
And this presentation, that some of your bosses still have the handout you gave them, but it was this presentation about you, why, how, what, and then you finished with, I want you to hire the best person for USC football. And if that's not me, please do not hire me, which of course we all know how that played out with your current role now. But something that Steve talks a lot about is not only starting with the why, but you have to put the what with it as well. Anyone can have kind of motivation, but if you don't have direction, which is the what, and what you actually kind of do on a daily basis, so kind of putting that all together in a systematic fashion, and then being able to present it and speak on it and believe it and do it, was quite the feat. So anything kind of from Steve and Dr. Wagle on Kyle's presentation, or kind of what he shared about that? Anyone want to hop in?
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I would say, Kyle, what do you think were the biggest pieces of your personal philosophy that made an impact with them at USC that kind of gave you that edge that they did want to hire you, even though you ended it saying, if I'm not the right guy? What do you think, looking back, that what really was that leverage piece for you?
I think it's understanding the culture I was walking into. I think that was a big part of it, especially at a program like USC. Nationally, you know about the Trojan family. That's a really important thing, whether you're an undergrad, whether you were an athlete here, whether you have spent a significant part of your life at USC, you're part of that Trojan family. So I care deeply about this university and this athletics department. And that's why I said what I said. I didn't say it as a bargaining chip to say I'm a great person. I said it because I meant it, and I still mean it. If I'm not the right person for this job, please bring in someone who's going to be better, because I want this program to be successful. That's ultimately what matters. And I can work somewhere else. I don't have to be at USC, but ultimately, like, that's kind of where that came from, is I want them to make the best choice so that we're all happy with the decisions that we ended up making. Yeah, that's a scary thing to say. I was coming off of a paid internship. Like, I didn't have a job. Like, this is what I always wanted. So I was like, okay, I'm going to say the things I need to say, but ultimately it was saying, hey, this is honestly what I want, but you have to make the best choice. And I think authenticity plays a big role. And especially in the internet age that we're in with all the social media stuff, you see a lot of stuff that's not real. So you don't really understand what is true and what's false. And I think authenticity kind of shows through, at least when you're in person.
Fantastic. Love it. Dr. Wagle, did you have a comment?
I was actually just going to kind of express the sentiment that I wish I was there, and that I think that would have been a great presentation. And one thing that really stood out to me was just kind of compatible with the experiences I've had, especially here. I have the good fortune to work under some great leaders here, and they talk often about the importance of both compatibility and competence, and that seems to be a really important piece for USC, especially when you do have a legacy. You've got tradition to carry on, and so I guess my follow-up question for Kyle is, you mentioned coming off a paid internship, the compatibility piece, which is oftentimes the most difficult part for people to demonstrate in an interview process. That part was pretty easy for you in this one, or not easy, but easier in relative terms. So how'd you go about, showing the value that you could add and demonstrating your competence for a role like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to Matt's credit, Matt does a fantastic job at networking. Does a fantastic job of not just knowing people, but getting to know people and taking those things that he learns and applies them to his job. I see some fantastic work you guys are doing at TCBoost. I remember being a graduate assistant at UCLA, where, John, you were finishing up your dissertation at ETSU, and I hopped on the phone through a mutual colleague, and that started hey, I'm going to reach out to people and try to figure out what's going on here. We kept in contact while I was at Louisville too. So that was a big part of it, is growing this branch of almost virtual mentors in a way of, hey, what are people that are older in this field doing so that I can learn from them without having to make the same mistakes possibly that they made. Also, I was incredibly fortunate at the University of Louisville. I got to work under a great performance analytics coordinator, Paul Jones, and they're still continuing to build out the department at Louisville. I actually just saw today they posted a director of sports science role. They're really trying to build something innovative in the collegiate space. So it's a fascinating thing to see. I've been very fortunate with being able to work for great people. And that gave me some confidence when I'm giving a presentation and your boss says, hey, you can go work at any college in the country with what you just showed me right now, and based off of what you do every single day. Now, I showed up in the first month I was here. I'm like, when are they going to figure out that I don't belong here? You know, when are they going to figure out that this wasn't the job? And then you get to know the players, you get to know the staff, you get to know how things work here. And you're like, oh, no, I for sure belong here. Like, I can definitely help with different things. So that's my long answer to your question.
It's interesting you phrased it how you did. And this idea of having kind of virtual mentors or just people that you can bounce ideas off of, people that can give you their honest 2 cents. And I was on another podcast and they asked, you know, like, what content do I consume or recommend? And I used to listen to more podcasts. Well, my commute is about 4 miles, which Steve is not jealous of or anything. But, you know, and then Steve said, well, you probably consume the most content of all of us with all the people that, you know, you just have in your network and you talk with on a regular or semi-regular basis. And even just my most recent call with Dr. Wagle, and just, if you had this situation, theoretically speaking, asking her for a friend, what would you do? And just being able to hear your thought process and things like that. And it's just like, there's so much to be said about people who have been there, done that, but then are also smart enough, competent enough, and kind enough to like share their insights and also take the time to just like the thought process and put it all together. So this idea of having virtual mentors is like content consumption in and of itself. You know, you can read the book or you can call the author and ask about it, you know? So I think that was an awesome kind of just illustration of that point. And then any kind of last comments on that, and then we'll get on to the next little roundtable.
I think I've definitely said it all in terms of that particular presentation, and I'm just happy to be here. I mean, I'm sitting in a basement looking at an empty weight room right now, so it's pretty cool. And hopefully I look kind of smart with all the stuff on my whiteboard.
Living the dream. Awesome. So next, we'll get on next episode 70. And this is something that I talk about a lot, is this idea of challenges, both positive and negative, and also fulfillments of jobs. And it's an interesting and unique lens of which to think about opportunities and what to take and what to pass on, and just reflecting on previous jobs or experiences that people have had. So the specific thing that I'm mentioning is Dr. Wagle deciding to leave DePaul when you had an awesome setup with just being the director of everything and working with men's basketball, and your coaches were awesome that you worked for, and the athletes were awesome, but you just wanted more, and just leaving that, going to ETSU. So if you could just briefly elaborate a little bit more on that story, and then we'll get it going.
Yeah. So back in, I think it was 2015 or 2016 was the year I decided to leave DePaul, which when I was engaging with people within the field, you know, a lot of the expressed difficulty in leaving the position was about the title or the situation or things like that. But really the most challenging part for me was leaving those people. And that includes student athletes, the staff, and I'm talking about the strength conditioning staff. You know, Chris Drescher and Nick Higgins were wonderful to work with. The sports medicine team led by Sue Walsh was amazing. The coaches that I got the opportunity to work alongside, like the list goes on, and I think you get the point. But, you know, that made the decision a lot more difficult to me, quite honestly, because I know how difficult it is to find a place that's such a good fit. And I've been fortunate to land in a couple of places, ETSU and now with the Royals that are both that as well. So I've been very blessed, but that was the most challenging part. But it was born in, you know, I had been the director for a couple of years at that point, And, for whether I was right or not, I guess the, the jury's still out, but I thought to myself, like I see people like Duncan French, like Brad DeWeese, like Mike Stone, like, the Jeremy Shepard, these people that were just elite practitioners, great coaches, great sports scientists. They kind of did it all, and thought that I had the potential, and I'm still working towards that, but I had the potential to be of that caliber. And so the thing that I was missing, from my perspective at least, was the experience of the terminal degree, not necessarily the title that comes with it or anything like that. But I needed to kind of round out my scientific skill set and learn how to answer questions and do research, and both external and internal, and kind of just refine those skills. And so that's where I took a look around the country of not only a academic program that could give that to me, but also placed me, and I know there's been a lot of talk about mentors, but placed me with mentors that would challenge me, but also provide me the support needed and the experiences needed to be able to come out of the program and be a better version of myself. And so that's where kind of all roads led me, from Chicago, Illinois to Johnson City, Tennessee, of all places. And when I started my search, I would have never pinned that place on a map. And the only time I had heard of it was in the song Wagon Wheel. But it's a wonderful place, wonderful school. It's a great environment to be challenged, to learn a lot, and to stay, practicing. And that's really the unique aspect of ETSU, is you get lectures daily from legends like Dr. Stone, but then you get to go and coach athletes and work in working kind of an applied sports science setting, and do all of those things that makes the learning that much more enriching. And so that made the decision to leave all those people that I loved at DePaul a lot easier. Didn't make it easy. I am not ashamed to admit that I've probably cried more in that stretch that I was telling everybody that I was moving on than any point in my life. But I knew it was the right decision, and that let me sleep well at night, and still does. And on the back end of it, I can say that a lot of the things I was seeking when I was at DePaul that I needed for my development, I got those, and I continue to develop in my current role. But I ended up in a great spot that's also a good fit. And a lot of the fears that were expressed, or the concerns that, like, my professional network expressed, like, oh man, you're going to leave this position. I got really lucky to be able to step back into the field and into another job at another place that's really challenging and a really good fit. And so I know how blessed I am, but I also am grateful for taking the dive as well, and kind of having the courage enough to go in and do it.
And hearing the first time hearing you just be able to organize and, I guess, like, categorize the things you liked, didn't like, the things you wanted, the things that were missing in this idea of challenges and fulfillments, was definitely like a huge light bulb for me. And definitely going along with the theme of mentors, and it definitely it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, it takes 10 more than that to raise a good practitioner. So Kyle, Steve, what kind of popped out?
Yeah, I'm really interested, John. I know we've spoken offline like quite a bit about this, but you made a decision with an unknown, right? We can talk back and we can look at what happened and how you've ended up in a great organization with an awesome title, doing great stuff, the stuff that you want to be doing. But you didn't know whether, when you made that decision at DePaul at the time, whether that was going to be the right choice. Like, what was your decision-making process when you said, hey, ETSU is the right place for me?
I did go to visit. I mean, I did my homework first and foremost. I looked at who was there. And I mentioned even a list of people that I was admiring on the front end of that. I had followed Dr. Stone's work. I had followed Dr. DeWeese's work. And so they both happened to be in the same place, which, when I was at DePaul, I didn't really connect those dots until I was looking at PhD programs and said, oh goodness, like these people are all teaching at the same institution. And so that kind of drove the ETSU aspect. I would say I had a harder time reconciling the pursuit of a PhD and quitting a full-time job that I really liked more so than I did going to ETSU. Like once I had made the decision to pursue the PhD, candidly, going to ETSU was the easy part because they make it very easy with that caliber of faculty and the experience that they provide. For me, the difficult decision, or the difficult part of the decision, was even in taking the plunge to begin with.
John, I have a question about, in a profession that there's so much turnover. Like, it's very few that anyone in any of our industries, whether it's private, professional, collegiate, stays in the same place. When you originally took your position at DePaul, where was your mind at as far as, was that a potential place you're going to be at for a long time? Or was it already in your mind that you had clarity about what you were trying to get to 10 years down the road, and this was going to be a piece of that map, but it wasn't really the end of it? How clear were you when you took that job as to what was going to be happening?
Quite honestly, when I took the position, I was 26 years old, I think 27 years old, maybe. So I wasn't as kind of keyed in on that reality, I would say. And I would also, I interned at DePaul. I was an assistant at DePaul, and I was a director at DePaul. And I could have worked there for my whole career and been perfectly happy. Like that's how highly I think of DePaul and the experience that I had there. So I was certainly, like, I wasn't naive. I had been in strength conditioning at that point for several years. So I knew that the turnover was real, but it doesn't really kind of factor into your decision making until it either happens to you personally, or it happens to a lot of people that are around you. And I would say the dose of that reality came actually after my first year in the director position, where unfortunately the basketball coach that I originally worked with my first year, we made a change, and at that university, and a lot of the staff went along with it. And so that's where I got that dose of reality that, oh man, like this is, these are people's lives, and this happens overnight, and it does. And so from that point on, I kind of had that perspective, and really all you can do is just be grateful for the next day that you get to do whatever job that it is. But you also have to do your job to the best of your ability, and not in a manner that just allows you to keep your job, because then you won't make decisions that are in the best interest of the organization. You won't make decisions that are in the best interest of the athletes. And so, though it's volatile, and this is not necessarily the answer to the question you asked, I'm kind of taking a left turn here, but though that's a reality that we all face, I think that it's also really important that we do have a purpose beyond keeping our jobs, because that's how we can serve the athletes and the staffs and everybody else that we're trying to support the best we can. But it's also the way, even if we wanted to be selfish, that is the way that we can be the best version of ourselves as a professional too. Otherwise, we're always going to be below whatever it is that our ceiling is, because we're going to be operating with intentions that are not aligned with the purpose of the position itself. So that's another thing that maybe over the course of the years I've become a little bit more comfortable with as well. And it's easier said than done, but and something I'm still working towards on a daily basis, but one that I do think is important to share.
Very interesting. And this is a product of a conversation with Steve. Was like, it's interesting how if you have that next step, if you're clear about that, it's how do I use my time here to not be here or get to that next step? And that's when you put in your best work. So whether it's, you don't necessarily know what's next, but you just want more, whether it's more for your current spot or whether it's to kind of leapfrog. But the moral of the story is you just have to do really awesome work, and whether it's, you don't know what's going to pop up, or whether you have a specific kind of goal in mind, or as you're pursuing things, it becomes more clear as you go. I remember that.
And I think too, like my last little comment on that, a lot of people that work in sport, like at one point we were athletes. And one really important thing is when you're an athlete, like I played baseball, like I mentioned earlier, you play where your spikes are, and I think when we get into careers and things like that, it becomes a really exhausting chess match. And sometimes we just have to remind ourselves to play where our spikes are at and be in the moment and be in the present and do the best that we can for our athletes who are in front of us, for that organization that given day. And it's funny how things have a way of working themselves out in your personal favor once you give that the time to develop and to refine your skills and to meet certain people and those types of things. But it's a fool's errand, in my opinion, to kind of try to manipulate that trajectory too much.
And I can firsthand speak on the exhaustion that rat race has, and I can single-handedly give you guys credit for keeping me sane, or for picking up the phone when I called about just me going through that huge journey way back when. But that's a good segue into our last little discussion. Coach Steve of episode 88, and who has been at TCBoost for 8, 9, 10 years, some too many years, a lot of years. And if you could just briefly elaborate on, and I remember this conversation as it was like raining and it was misty and foggy, and just leaving, walking to our cars, but just how you have been at TCBoost for so long, and kind of how it was like looking through the fog and what I'm talking about. But if you just briefly kind of chat on that.
Yeah, for in the private side, there's such an opportunity to really take hold of the trajectory of where you're going. A little contrary to kind of what Dr. Wagle was just kind of talking about is there's so many avenues that you can take in a specific job. So the fact that I just work at this one facility, there still is a gigantic platform that I'm on to take hold of where I'm going next. What's the impact that I'm trying to make? And one of the things that Matt and I talked about was when you're in this one setting, you're like, oh man, I need more. In reality, I can do pretty much everything from where I'm currently at. And I don't have to leave to make that happen. I'm able to train a variety of athletes. I'm able to work with adult populations. I'm able to do work with other coaches across the country from this one location. And as long as I'm clear about the impact I'm trying to make, that's not necessarily dictated by where I'm at. It allows me to be anywhere in making that sort of impact. And so where other people might say like, oh man, aren't you frustrated by this or that in your current location? It's like, well, maybe I would be if I wasn't clear about what I'm trying to do impact wise. And so it allows me to have some peace of mind when there's things that happen around me that don't necessarily affect what the impact I'm trying to make. It may affect the trajectory of the company I currently am at a little bit, but if it's beyond my control, I can't let that make me become disgruntled or too frustrated that I lose track of the clarity of the impact I'm going after and the people's lives that I'm working with. And that's what allows me personally to stay in this one spot, because the evolution of what I'm actually doing day to day, week to week, has changed dramatically from when I walked through the door 8 years ago to what I do right now.
Yeah. And what's funny is what came before that conversation the first time was I asked you to go through all of the colleagues that I've had on and off for the last 5 years. And the big difference maker was like when they joined TCBoost, in their mind, it was like, that's all it can be, is just their current role. And then you listed off all the variety of athletes and getting in different high schools. And now with Jeremy Boone, just all this different kind of stuff. It's like, this is just it's always been a platform, and it's become more clear and opportunities have presented itself, but it's almost like the flexibility. I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for, but it's never been the end for you. If I had to compare and contrast between kind of other people that have been at TCBoost. So how does that all sound to John and Kyle, and who wants to pop in?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm very envious of that. Like, just listening to the way you're talking about it. I was listening to a different podcast this morning. I was listening to Rob Pacey's podcast, and the guy that he had on used to work for Microsoft. Now he works at Benfica, one of his soccer clubs in Portugal. And he mentioned because he was at Microsoft, they are very client oriented, right? And I imagine that's a big thing in the private sector. Once again, never worked in the private sector. I might not know what I'm talking about, so please correct me if I'm. But it's interesting because it becomes very client centric. Okay, you got to make sure this person's happy, make sure they're getting results, make sure that they're having a positive experience so that they'll continue to come back. And they're making that choice. Versus in the college sector, at least what I deal with, they have no choice. If I make a kid wear a Catapult sports bra, he's going to wear it, right? Like, that's what they're going to do. And that's what we've done for years, right? But also, to your point, it gets frustrating because our job is to win, right? Like, I'm not going to speak for John, but USC football's job is to win. And there's a lot of pressure as it relates to that as well. I've worked with a lot of people because people have gotten fired. It's the reality of the situation. And yeah, to John's point, you work as hard as you can. So what I guess I'm commenting at, Steve, is like, it's a fascinating mindset that you've adopted. And I'm definitely going to take that out of this conversation for sure. Is, hey, what impacts can I make? It becomes difficult when you're embedded in a team because you really think about that next Saturday and you think about that next game, and how good you do makes you, how good your team does makes you feel like, oh, you did a good job. Like, I'll talk crap to my friend at Stanford when we beat Stanford, but also, like, really doesn't matter. Like, she's running Catapult there, I'm running Catapult at USC. How much does that affect the scoreboard? Next to zero. But I can talk crap because we haven't played in 2 years. So I guess that's my comment on the situation, is like, it's different being embedded in a team, but it's fascinating to hear that you've been able to make such an impact in so many different ways because of, quote, flexibility within the private sector.
Yeah. I think honestly, like Kyle, based even on that, is my mindset for it is not necessarily that my identity is tied to the athletes that I'm working with. And I think that's such a hard thing sometimes. Like, in the high school, I have that opportunity with when I'm training the football team or I'm training the basketball team. And it's more as a piece of the clarity about what the impact that I, as Steve Breitenstein, want to make in the world. And where I'm at right now, that's helping me create that impact. But it doesn't put a cap on the impact I can make. Like those athletes I train in the facility, that's a piece of the impact I'm making. But there's too many ways for me to make a bigger impact than that, to limit myself. If I really believe that I'm doing as good a job as I think I am with helping people become better in fitness, speed, strength, whatever the actual measure is, like, I'm limiting myself by saying, like, I'm only going to work with this group. And I want to make sure that I am scaling my impact for what I'm really chasing and pursuing. And that's what allows me then to feel like this flexibility piece. Cause it's like, oh man, I have this ability to go all over the place. I don't have anybody saying, like, you can't post on social media about what you're doing because it's a secret that what we do here at TCBoost. Like, whatever, man, we all do A runs, we all do resisted sprints, we all do clean squats, whatever, but the experience I try to create is the one that if I line up with 5 other coaches, I want people to choose they're going to work with me because of the experience I create for them.
Yeah, no, you said a lot of really good things there. And Kyle, I'll even kind of piggyback off of what you said there. We in sports science and strength conditioning, whatever kind of support role that we're in, we're still teammates and we still like winning. Like, I'm competitive to a fault, I will admit. And like, I work in sports because I like winning. I probably hate losing more so than I enjoy the wins. But you know, and I think Steve, you touched on something really great, that sometimes when you've been at a place for a stretch, the challenge is to find those personal wins, and Matt talks about it as fulfillment. But can you just elaborate a little bit more about those moments when you need to find new ways to challenge yourself within a role, and how you go about finding different areas to explore to improve yourself, or to just gain fulfillment in the role?
Yeah, you know, like for me, my frustration became that at the beginning, it was I was chasing becoming the busiest trainer at the facility. Like that happened, you know, and then you're like, oh, well, now what am I really trying to? Oh, I want to be the director of coaching. Oh, I made that. Okay, now I'm the director of coaching. Cool. Now what do I want to do? And it came to a point where it was one of those like line in the sands of like, either I need to figure out what I'm really actually trying to do impact wise in the world, or I just need to leave here and just go chase something else, because I'm feeling like I'm capped at this point with what I can do. Like I'm coaching 50, 60 hours a week. I'm making as much money as I possibly can based on like an hour per dollar value, you know? And what had to happen is I searched out Jeremy Boone, and I said, like, I'm going to go through, after talking with him and meeting with him a little bit, and I'm going to go through your leadership development program. Like I'm going to pay and I'm going to go through this because I need some guidance on this, and I'm not receiving that mentorship right now. After I went through that, one of the challenging pieces in that is really identifying like, what is the story that I want to tell as far as feeling like I'm a success beyond just coaching people every single day, you know? And the impact I'm looking to make is guiding athletes and coaches to achievements beyond what they thought were possible. It's big, it's vague, but it doesn't tie me to, I have to be a coach at TCBoost in order to do this. It doesn't mean I have to take athletes who run a 1-1 flying 10 down to a 0.99. That doesn't matter. You know, like that's not what I'm chasing, is these specific numerical like outcomes that are going to define if I was successful or not. It's that I'm guiding these athletes and coaches. And that's the part that like kind of separated for me. And now, is training a part of that? Heck yeah, it is. You know, but there's a lot of the mental piece and the leadership piece that also helps them achieve things that are beyond what they thought were possible. And that's what allows me to kind of expand that impact that I'm making. And then when I found that as like kind of what was guiding me, my day-to-day now becomes clear about like, am I being true to that with what I'm doing this day? Is this next opportunity bringing me closer to really making an impact at a scale that I didn't even know was possible? And it's taking me a lot of courage to get there. Or is this just a distraction that's taking me laterally away from what I'm doing right now, actually not taking me to that next spot of what I'm trying to do? And that's kind of what guides me as far as like, what are those next opportunities that are coming my way? The work that I'm trying to do with Jeremy Boone down south is separate than TCBoost, but what I do at TCBoost helps me get prepared to do a better job at that. Then running a podcast with Nick Bratton out in New Orleans, like that aligns really well with the impact that I want to make in the industry and the world as a whole. And so it's like, all right, that's a good thing. Even though it's going to be a distraction of some sort, I can allocate time appropriately to be able to kind of pursue that as well. You know, but for me, my mind, I work better from like this one spot, but then I'm able to branch out of that spot and do these other things. I don't know if there's really a role somewhere that would be like, that's a fulfilling role for me, because there's all these other things I enjoy being a part of, and the freedom that I have based on what I'm trying to pursue is what's really enjoyable for me.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So I know that I've name dropped each one of you guys with each other as the years, I guess years have gone on, and I'm super grateful, like I said, for each one of you. I don't want to understate that. And if I ever have, please let me know. But thank you for your time and for sharing, for the awesome discussion and questions. And it's super cool for me as each one of you have contributed to these last 2 years, just for my story and for however many years are to come to each one of you guys. And TSP and all that stuff. So hopefully I can do you guys justice. So I want to say thank you very much again for being open and sharing and vulnerable and being interactive and stuff. And this means a lot. And this is better than the 100th episode I could have ever imagined. So it means a lot to me. And I want to say thank you again. And I'm looking forward to our next chat for sure.
Of course, Matt. Appreciate you having us. It's been great.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's an honor.
Thanks, Matt. It was great to talk with you more after I just left the facility an hour ago with you.
And I'll see you in about 12 hours.